My daughter said, "You'll eat after everyone else gets settled." And something inside me broke. Not loudly, not the way things break in movies, with shattering glass and raised voices and someone storming out into the rain. No, this was quieter than that. It was the sound of frost splitting old wood, slow, clean, and completely beyond repair. I looked down at the roasting pan in my hands, still hot through the oven mitts. The smell of rosemary and red wine and my mother's secret, a spoonful of apricot jam stirred into the drippings, rose up around me like something sacred. I had been awake since 6 that morning. I had taken the bus to the market alone because Sandra was busy. I had stood in this kitchen that used to be mine, in this house that still had my name on the deed, and I had given 8 hours of myself to this meal. I looked at the dining room. 30 feet away, the table was full. Sandra's colleagues from the firm, her husband Daniel's golf friends, the children shrieking and chasing each other between the legs of adults who laughed too loudly and refilled their wine without looking up. It was a celebration of something, a promotion, a deal closed. I had already forgotten which. What I had not forgotten was that no one had asked me to sit down. Sandra passed through the kitchen doorway without stopping. She had her hostess face on, the smile that was really just a performance of warmth. "Mom, you'll eat after everyone else gets settled. We need to make sure the kids are fed first." She was already gone before I could answer. I stood there with the pan in my hands, and I looked at the room full of people who did not see me standing there, and I heard it. That slow, clean crack. I set the pan back down on the stovetop. Then I picked it up again, and I walked out the front door. The air outside was colder than I expected. October in this part of the country does not ease you into itself. It arrives without apology. The foil over the pan was thin, and the heat came through it in waves against my palms, but I did not stop walking. No one called after me. I listened for it. A gasp, a voice, the scrape of a chair. Nothing. Just the muffled sound of conversation continuing behind me, a child laughing at something, the clink of someone's fork against good china. The door swung shut on its own. 3 blocks. That was all. I had lived in this neighborhood for 31 years. I knew which sidewalk squares heaved up in spring when the oak roots pushed through. I knew which porch light Mrs. Adler always left on even after she passed, and the house sold to strangers. I knew the way the street lamps turned the maple leaves orange before autumn even touched them. I carried that roast pan 3 blocks in the dark like it was something I had rescued, because it was. The house smelled like lemon soap and old dust when I pushed the door open with my shoulder. My house, the one I had raised 2 daughters in, paid off over 22 years, repainted twice myself with Earl helping on the rollers while I did the trim. The one Sandra had convinced me to leave 14 months ago. "It'll be easier, Mom. You won't have to worry about bills. We'll take care of you." I had believed her. I had wanted to believe her. There is something as a mother that never stops hoping her children mean what they say. I set the pan on the kitchen counter. The silence settled around me the way a quilt does, slowly, from the edges in. No voices asking where the serving spoon was. No television left at full volume. No one needing anything from me in the next 30 seconds. Just the ticking of the clock I hadn't wound in 3 weeks. I found a plate in the cabinet. One of the old ones with blue flowers around the rim, chipped slightly at the edge from the time Earl dropped it and glued it back because I loved it too much to throw away. I peeled back the foil. The meat was still steaming, still fragrant, the pan juices bubbling slow and amber around the edges. I cut a thick slice. I spooned the drippings over it the way my mother taught me, letting them pool and settle before I lifted the plate. I sat down at my own table, and I ate, slowly, deliberately, the way you eat when no one is asking you to hurry, when no one needs the table cleared, when the meal belongs entirely to you. The meat was tender all the way through. The herbs had done what 8 hours of patience allowed them to do. The apricot and the drippings gave it something sweet beneath the savory that most people never notice, but that I had always believed was the secret to why everyone cleaned their plates. It might have been the finest roast I had ever made. No one told me so. No one interrupted me. And for the first time in longer than I could name, I tasted every single bite. When I finished, I washed the plate, dried it with the dish towel that hung on the oven handle, and put it back in the cabinet where it belonged. Then I sat in the chair by the front window and watched the maple trees sway in the wind. I thought about Sandra's voice, the flatness of it. "You'll eat after everyone else." Not cruel the way cruelty announces itself, just efficient. Cold in the particular way of someone who has decided, without drama or examination, exactly what you are worth in the order of things. I thought about how I had gotten here. Not to this chair, not to this neighborhood, but to being a woman who carries the roast and still gets told to wait. It did not happen all at once. That is the thing about this kind of erosion. It does not come as a flood. It comes as a slow leak, steady and almost invisible. And by the time you notice how much has drained away, you have forgotten what full felt like. After Earl died 15 years ago, I did not crumble. I paid the mortgage. I worked the late shifts at the elementary school where I had taught 3rd grade for 19 years. I made the school lunches, signed the permission slips, kept the porch light on. Sandra was 23, newly launched into her career and eager to leave a house she said felt too heavy. Lily was 17, still home, still mine. Lily stayed. She helped with groceries when she could. She made me laugh on the nights that went too quiet. She sat on the back porch and talked to the sky like it was an old friend, and when I asked her once what she was saying to it, she told me she was practicing for when she had something worth saying. She had something worth saying every single day. I just wish I had told her that more. When Lily died, 8 years ago now, breast cancer, 41 years old, something shifted in the family's gravity. Sandra stepped forward in the way older siblings sometimes do, filling space with organization and logistics and the appearance of strength. She arranged the memorial. She handled the paperwork. She decided where Lily's daughter Cora would live. Cora was 15 then. Too young, Sandra said, to live with a grandmother who might need looking after herself. I wanted to argue. I had enough in me still to raise a teenager. But I let it happen. And maybe that was the first real surrender. Not to age, but to the idea that I had become something that needed managing rather than something capable of managing itself. The years that followed moved in the direction of compromise, each one small enough to seem reasonable. Sandra convinced me to sell the car. "We'll take you anywhere you need to go, Mom." Except they rarely did. She took over managing the bills. "It's just easier if everything's in one place." She suggested I stop hosting Christmas because the preparation was too much for me. "Let us do it. You just rest." Every time I let go of something, I told myself I was being practical. Every time the floor got a little smaller beneath my feet. When she suggested I move in with them 14 months ago, she framed it as care. "You shouldn't be alone in that big house, Mom. We'll take care of you." What she did not say, what I understand now, is that it was also easier for her when I was where she could see me, where she could define me, where I was the help, not the guest. I gave up my independence in small enough increments that I never felt the loss of any single one. And then one evening I was standing in my own kitchen with a roasting pan I had spent 8 hours on, and someone who used to fit in the palm of my hand told me to wait until everyone else had eaten. And I heard the crack. The phone rang twice that night. Sandra's name on the screen, both times. I watched it light up and fade without answering. She did not leave a message. The silence that followed felt deliberate on her end, the kind of silence meant to apply pressure. It didn't. I slept better than I had in months. Not the easy sleep of peace, but the deep sleep that comes when you stop fighting yourself. I woke the next morning with the first light, as I always have, and I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of Earl Grey and a thin slice of the cold roast, even better after a night of resting. I did not heat it. I did not fuss. I ate it as it was. Then I got out a pen and a notepad. The list I wrote that morning was not long, but every word on it was mine. Check the bank accounts. Call Mr. Patterson. Read the deed. Call Cora. I started with the bank. Sandra had offered to manage the accounts 2 years ago, after a confusion with an online payment that I had simply not seen. "It would be so much easier if I could just handle it for you, Mom, just in case." I had added her as an authorized user on the checking account first, then the savings. "Just for emergencies," she had said, "just so someone can step in if something happens." It had seemed practical. I reset the password. Sandra had been logging in regularly enough that the browser remembered hers, not mine. The security questions were still the ones I had chosen years ago. The name of the street I grew up on, the make of my first car, my mother's maiden name. Things Sandra would not know to guess because she had never thought to ask. The balance was intact. That steadied me. What did not steady me was the transaction history. I scrolled slowly. The way you read a letter you are not sure you want to finish. And there it was, line by line, patient and undeniable. A recurring transfer of $450 every month to an account I did not recognize. A monthly charge labeled Home Services with no vendor name and no corresponding invoice I had ever seen. Smaller charges, subscriptions, rideshare charges, things that looked like ordinary life, except that none of it was my ordinary life. I sat very still at the kitchen table. I did not cry. There was nothing in me that wanted to cry. What I felt was something colder and cleaner than grief. The feeling of a picture finally coming into focus after you have been squinting at it for a long time. I picked up my pen and wrote below the first item on my list. Remove her. All of it. I called Cora before I called the bank. She picked up on the first ring. Grandma. The word landed like warm light. Hi, sweetheart. A pause. Then, carefully. Are you okay? Mom came home last night looking like she'd seen something she couldn't explain. She didn't say much, but I could tell. Something happened, I said. I remembered I'm still alive. Cora was quiet for a moment. Then she let out a short, bright laugh. Her mother's laugh, Lily's laugh. Well, that's one way to put it. I left, I said. Last night, I took the roast and I walked home. Another pause, no judgment in it, just a slow exhale that sounded like relief. Good, she said. Good for you. My throat tightened. I had not expected that. I had expected confusion, or the particular wariness of a young person caught between adults. What I got instead was simple, unqualified, good. Would you like to come by sometime? I asked. I'll make lunch, nothing fancy. Tomorrow, she said, almost before I finished the sentence. If that's okay? Tomorrow would be lovely. She came the next morning with a brown paper bag from the little bakery near the library where she worked. Cinnamon twists, still warm. She poured the tea the way she had watched me do it since she was small. Pot first, then the cup. 2 minutes, no longer. We did not rush. We sat at the kitchen table and ate slowly, and let the quiet be what it was. I saw her face, Cora said finally, when the first twist was gone and we were both warming our hands on our mugs. When she came back to the table, she looked hollow, like she hadn't expected you to actually go. I sipped my tea. Neither did I, until I did. I'm glad you did. She looked down at the table. I wanted to say something to her 100 times, but it never felt like my place. It wasn't, I said. And yet here you are. She smiled at that, but it was a soft smile, the kind that carries something heavier underneath it. She looked up after a moment. She's not a bad person, Grandma. I want you to know I know that. I know she's not. But she treats you like... Cora stopped, searching. Like a favor she's doing for the universe. Like she expects applause just for letting you exist near her. I did not say anything. That sounds harsh, she added quickly. No, I said. It sounds accurate. We sat with that for a while, in the way you can only sit with the truth when someone has finally said it out loud. Before she left, Cora reached into her jacket pocket and set a small ring of keys on the table between us. I made copies, she said, for emergencies, but also just so I can come over, whenever, if you want. I picked them up. 3 keys, one with a little pink cover. Do I get a say in the keychain? I asked. Cora grinned. That part is non-negotiable. After she left, I went back to my list. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that, because anger is what people expect from a story like this, and anger would have been so much simpler. Anger moves fast. Anger burns bright and then burns out, and you are left standing in the ash of it. What I felt was different. Older. Quieter. I felt the way a room feels when someone finally opens the windows after a long winter. The rush of something clean. The slight sting of cold. And underneath it all, the overwhelming sense that air was always supposed to move like this. I went back to my list. Remove her. All of it. I read those words, and I thought about the woman who had written them. The woman who had stood in a kitchen with a roasting pan and heard the sound of herself deciding. That woman was still here. She had just needed a reason to remember it. I circled the words. Then I added below them, in the firm, practiced handwriting of a woman who spent 30 years writing spelling words on a chalkboard. She doesn't know what's coming. Neither did I. Until I did. I dressed carefully that morning, not because I was trying to impress anyone, not because I needed armor, exactly, but because there is something in the act of choosing what you put on your body that reminds you the body is yours. The navy sweater, the gray slacks I had pressed the night before, the silver beret Lily had given me the Christmas before Cora was born. It makes you look sharp, Mom, like someone who knows things. I pinned it into place and looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. I looked like Dorothy Hargrove. I had almost forgotten what that looked like. I put my notepad in my leather bag, the old one with the worn strap that Sandra had tried twice to replace with something newer, and I had refused both times. I walked to the corner and waited for the bus. No one chauffeuring me around like luggage. No one calling to ask where I was going. Just me, standing at a bus stop in the October morning air, going somewhere on my own terms. It felt extraordinary. It should not have, but it did. The bank branch was 12 minutes by bus and 2 blocks of walking. Kevin Barlow was the young man who met me at the counter, his name on a small tag above his left pocket, his smile polite and slightly cautious in the way that young people's smiles sometimes are when they see a woman my age walking in alone. They expect confusion. They expect tears. They brace themselves for something they will have to navigate gently. I did not give him the chance. I placed my identification flat on the counter and looked him in the eye. I'd like to remove an authorized user from 2 accounts, I said. And I'd like to cancel all automatic transfers, every single one. He blinked once. Of course, if you'll step into one of our offices, I'll pull everything up. The office was small and clean, a desk and 2 chairs and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. Kevin sat across from me and turned the monitor so we could both see it. He pulled up the accounts and we went through them together, line by line, the way you go through a house after a long absence, slowly, noticing what has changed, what has been moved without your permission. The $450 monthly transfer to the school tuition account. Kevin paused on it. This has been running for 14 months, he said carefully. Do you recognize it? I do now, I said. Cancel it. He moved on. The home services charge, $200 monthly, no vendor listed in the description field. A cluster of smaller transactions, streaming subscriptions I had never signed up for, rideshare charges on days I had not gone anywhere, a recurring order from an online grocery delivery service I had never used. Do you recognize these? Kevin asked. I looked at them carefully. Each one was small enough on its own to seem almost invisible. That, I understood now, had been the design of it. No, I said. Cancel everything. His fingers moved across the keyboard. Then he paused again. Mrs. Hargrove, there's also the matter of online access. The authorized user has been logging into both accounts regularly. The last login was 4 days ago. 4 days ago, the morning after the dinner party. Revoke the access, I said, all of it, and remove her name from both accounts entirely. Of course, he typed. I'd also recommend, if you're comfortable, that we flag both accounts. It means if anyone attempts to re-establish access without your direct authorization, the system will alert us and require additional verification. I looked at him steadily. Flag them. He nodded and kept typing. Then he looked up. I'll need a new email address for the confirmation notices. The one on file is not mine anymore. I took a folded slip of paper from my notepad and set it on the desk. I had created the new address that morning before I left the house. Use this one. He took it without comment. A professional. I appreciated that. When we finished, he walked me to the door the way people walk someone to the door when they want to say something and are not sure if they should. At the threshold, he stopped. Anything else I can do for you today, Mrs. Hargrove? I smiled at him. Not the polite smile women my age have spent decades deploying to make other people comfortable. A real one. You've already done more than you know. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my sweater closer, but I was not cold, not even close. Something in my chest was humming, not with adrenaline, not with triumph, but with a quiet and absolute certainty that felt like standing on ground that had always been solid and finally remembering how to trust your own weight. That was only the first item on the list. Mr. Patterson's office smelled the same as it had the first time Earl and I walked through that door, 23 years ago, after Earl's first heart scare when we decided it was time to get the paperwork in order. Lemon polish and old paper and the particular stillness of a room where serious things were said and then written down so they could not be unsaid. The receptionist was new. The chairs in the waiting area had been reupholstered in faux leather instead of the dark green velvet I remembered. Small changes, the kind no one mentions but everyone feels. "Mrs. Hargrove," she smiled, "Mr. Patterson is expecting you." He stood when I came in, grayer than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his handshake was still firm and his expression was still the same, the particular calm of a man who has spent 40 years sitting across from people at the hardest moments of their lives and has learned that the most useful thing he can offer is steadiness. "Dorothy," he said, gesturing to the chair. "It's been too long." "Yes," I agreed. "It has." He folded his hands on the desk. "What brings you in?" I did not hesitate. I had rehearsed this on the bus, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to be precise. Precision mattered here. "I want to revise my will. I want to establish a living trust for my granddaughter Cora, and I want to revoke the financial power of attorney currently held by my daughter Sandra." Patterson looked at me for one quiet moment. Then he opened his legal pad. "All right," he said. "Let's go through it." I told him what I wanted. Everything to Cora. The house, the accounts, whatever remained of the investments Earl and I had built over 40 years of careful living. Cora as sole beneficiary of the trust, with me retaining control as trustee for as long as I was capable. The POA revoked immediately and completely. Patterson made notes without interrupting. When I finished, he looked up. "The trust is straightforward. We transfer ownership of your assets into the trust entity. You remain in the home, use the accounts as you always have, but legally the trust holds them. When the time comes, Cora inherits without going through probate." "Good. For the POA," he paused, opening a different folder on his desk, the one with my name on the tab. He turned pages slowly, and then he stopped. He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. "Dorothy," he said, "did you know the power of attorney Sandra holds is not limited to financial matters?" I felt the first cold thread move through me. "What do you mean?" He turned the document and slid it across the desk toward me. His finger rested below a section I had not read carefully enough, or perhaps had not read at all. On the afternoon, Sandra had spread several papers across my kitchen table and said, "It's just standard language, Mom, just in case something happens," while I was still thinking about whether I had taken the roast out to thaw. I read the section his finger indicated. Medical decisions. In the event that Dorothy Ann Hargrove was deemed unable to make or communicate her own medical decisions, Sandra Lynn Hargrove Webb held full authority to make those decisions on her behalf. Treatment. Hospitalization. The things that happen at the end, when you can no longer speak for yourself. I sat with that for a long moment. I thought about the afternoon Sandra had put those papers in front of me, her voice smooth and reassuring. "It's nothing dramatic, Mom, just practical. This way, if anything ever happens, someone can step in quickly without the courts getting involved." She had already had a pen uncapped. She had placed it near my hand without giving it to me directly. A small thing, barely noticeable, except that I noticed it now. She had been planning for a version of my future in which she held every key. Not out of love, out of habit, out of the assumption that I was already, in some essential way, no longer the one in charge of myself. "Revoke all of it," I said. My voice did not waver. "Financial and medical, everything." Patterson nodded once. "And Cora," I continued, "I want her listed as my medical proxy, in the directive." He glanced up briefly. "She's 23. I know how old she is. She's also the only person in my life who still asks what I want before deciding what's good for me." He held my gaze for a moment. Then he wrote it down. We worked through the rest of the details in another 40 minutes. The schedule of assets, the contingency language, the formal cease letter that would be sent to Sandra informing her that her power of attorney had been revoked and she had no further legal standing to act on my behalf in any capacity. Patterson slid the draft into a folder and set it on the corner of his desk. "I'll have everything drawn up by end of week. You'll come back to sign." "I'll be here." He stood to walk me out. At the door, he paused in the way Kevin had paused, that hesitation of someone with something left to say. "Most people wait too long," he said quietly, "until the damage is already done and we're working backward." I picked up my bag from the chair. "I waited long enough," I said, "but I'm here now." Sandra came 3 days later. I saw her through this front window before she knocked, standing on the porch with a foil-covered dish in her arms, and the particular expression of a woman who has prepared what she intends to say and is waiting for the stage to be ready. She had dressed nicely, that was the tell. Sandra always dressed up when she expected a performance. I let her knock twice before I opened the door. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was too bright, the hostess voice deployed in the wrong setting. "Sandra?" She held out the dish. "I brought your Tupperware back, and some food, turkey, from what was left over." I looked at the dish. I did not reach for it. "I have food," I said. Her smile flickered. She tried to look past me into the house. "I just thought, Mom, can I come in?" I stepped back and held the door open. She walked in the way she always walked into rooms, like the space owed her its walls. She set the dish onto the counter without asking if that was all right, and turned to face me. Her eyes moved around the kitchen, taking inventory the way she always did, looking for evidence of something she could fix or manage or improve. "Cora's been here," she said. Not a question. "Yes. She's not returning my calls." "That's between you and Cora." Sandra exhaled through her nose. The smile was gone now. "Mom, I know things have been tense. I know the other night didn't go the way it should have. But you have to understand. There were guests. There was an order to things. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to be disrespectful," I said. "Exactly. You just didn't care if you were." I kept my voice even. "That's not the same thing." She opened her mouth, closed it. The careful arguments she had prepared were built for a version of me that apologized quickly and absorbed blame like good insulation. They were not built for this. "That's not fair," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's not. But it is true." She crossed her arms. I recognized that posture. She had used it since she was 9 years old, when the world did not arrange itself the way she had decided it should. "You walked out with the main course," she said, "in front of everyone. Do you understand how that looked?" "I understand exactly how it looked," I said. "I made that roast. I spent 8 hours on it. And the woman who made it was told to wait in the kitchen while everyone else ate." I paused. "I carried it home. I sat at my own table, and I ate it while it was still warm. It was the best meal I've had in a very long time." Sandra stared at me. The confusion on her face was real. I had to give her that. She genuinely could not locate herself in the story I was telling, could not find the version of events where she was the one who had done something wrong. That, more than anything else, told me everything. "I don't need your leftovers, Sandra," I said gently. "Not the turkey, not the explanations." I walked to the front door and held it open. She stood in the kitchen for a moment longer, looking at me as if she might find in my face the familiar shape of the woman who always eventually came around. The woman who absorbed and forgave and reset and began again. That woman had walked out with the roast. Sandra picked up her dish from the counter and left. I closed the door behind her, softly. No slam, no theater. Some boundaries are stronger than any lock you could buy at a hardware store. Tommy came 2 evenings later. I did not expect him. I heard the doorbell and looked through the window and saw Sandra's son standing on the porch, 17 years old, all long limbs and nervous energy, holding a paper bag in both hands like it might escape if he loosened his grip. I opened the door. "Mom made me bring this," he said, thrusting the bag toward me without quite meeting my eyes. "Food, I think, and a card." I took it. "Do you want to come in?" He hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, the hesitation of a teenager deciding whether the adult world was safe to enter, and then nodded. Inside, he stood in the hallway while I set the bag on the counter and looked through it. Chicken in plastic containers. A slice of pie with the crust slightly burnt on one edge. A card in a plain white envelope with no name on the front. "She's scared," Tommy said from the hallway. I looked up at him. "Mom?" He shrugged one shoulder. "I think she's scared of not being forgiven. I don't know. She doesn't really say stuff like that. I'm just guessing." "That's a good guess," I said. "I'm just confused," he said. "You were always there, and now you're not. It feels weird." I set the bag down and turned to face him fully. "That's what happens," I said, "when people stop seeing you. You stop being there." He looked down at his sneakers. Big sneakers, expensive ones. Sandra's doing, I suspected. I mean Cora, she says you're not angry. She says you're just tired." "She's right." She usually is. He almost smiled. I liked it when you lived with us. Even when... He stopped. Even when what? He looked up. His face, for just a moment, was entirely unguarded. The face underneath the teenage performance of ease and disinterest. Even when Mom made it seem like you were kind of in the way. I held that sentence very carefully, the way you hold something fragile that has been handed to you unexpectedly. Thank you for telling me that, I said. Are we still family? He asked. The question came out smaller than his voice usually was. I looked at this boy who had eaten at my table and fallen asleep on my couch and brought me dead flowers from the yard when he was 4 years old because he thought they were pretty. Always, I said. But Tommy, family and boundaries are not enemies. He frowned. What does that mean? It means you are allowed to say no to people you love, and they are allowed to say it to you. That doesn't make you less family. It makes you honest. He stood with that for a moment, turning it over in the particular way of a young person encountering an idea they have not been given before. Then he stepped forward and put his arms around me, quick, slightly awkward, the hug of someone still learning how, and stepped back before I could properly return it. But it was real. After he left, I opened the card. Inside, one word, printed in plain type. Sorry. I held it in my hand for a long time. It was not enough. But I was not waiting for enough. I had spent too many years waiting for enough, and enough had never arrived, and I had stayed anyway. I was done staying for the promise of enough. I set the card on the counter, and I went to bed, and I slept the clean, unguarded sleep of a woman who has finally stopped arguing with herself. The papers were ready on a Thursday. The sky that morning was clear for the first time in days, the sun laying itself flat and gold across the sidewalks while the wind still carried real cold in it. I wore the wool coat, the one Lily had bought me the year she got her promotion, the one she said made me look like someone who did not ask for permission. I had not worn it in 2 years. Sandra had suggested it was too heavy for me now. I wore it. In Patterson's office, the documents were arranged in a neat row across the desk. The revised will, the trust agreement, with Cora named as sole beneficiary, the schedule of assets, the house, both accounts, the small investment fund Earl and I had built slowly over 4 decades, the medical directive naming Cora as my proxy for any decisions I could not make for myself, and at the end of the row, a cream envelope addressed in Patterson's assistant's handwriting, Sandra Lynn Hargrove Webb. She'll receive this by certified mail today, Patterson said, along with the formal revocation. She'll have no legal standing to act on your behalf from this point forward, financial or medical. I looked at the envelope. I thought about Sandra receiving it, the moment she opened it, the expression on her face. I did not feel pleasure in it. I want to be honest about that. I did not feel pleasure and I did not feel guilt, which perhaps surprised me more. What I felt was something simpler and older than either of those things. I felt accurate. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I signed every page slowly, watching my own name appear in my own handwriting. Dorothy Ann Hargrove. The way it had appeared on report cards and permission slips and mortgage documents, and Earl's birthday cards for 50 years. Still mine. Always mine. When the last page was signed, Patterson gathered everything into a binder and handed it across the desk. Keep this somewhere you can find it easily. Make sure Cora knows where it is. I will. He held my gaze for a moment. You're not just reclaiming things, Dorothy. You're protecting them. There's a difference. I stood and picked up my bag. That's exactly what I'm doing, I said. I took the long way home, past the elementary school where I had taught for 19 years, where I had learned the names of 642 children and remembered most of them still, past the hardware store where Earl used to buy nails he didn't need just to stand at the counter and talk to the owner about baseball, past the little park with the rusted swing set where Lily used to drag me on weekend mornings when she was small, insisting I was not too old to swing, even when I was already starting to feel it in my shoulders. When I reached my house, I stood outside for a moment before going in. Not a museum, not a burden, not a reminder of everything I had given away. A stronghold. Mine. I went inside, placed the binder in the kitchen drawer alongside the emergency flashlight and the spare checkbook, and I wrote Cora a letter. Not emotional, not dramatic, practical, where the binder was, Mr. Patterson's number, what to do and when and who to call. I sealed it in an envelope and wrote her name on the front in block letters. Then I placed it under the old cookie jar on the counter. She always lifts it when she visits. Has since she was small, checking to see if I had left something sweet inside. This time, I had. Sandra did not knock this time. She rang the bell. Once, then again. The second time longer, sharper. The kind of ring that is less a request and more a statement. I was at the kitchen table with my afternoon tea, and I sat with it for a moment, both hands around the mug, letting the warmth move through my palms. Then I set the mug down and went to the door. She was standing on the porch with her arms crossed and her jaw set, dressed in the dark blazer she wore when she needed to feel authoritative. Behind her, the afternoon light was already going thin and gold the way it does in late October, when the days start surrendering their edges earlier than you expect. "Hi, Sandra. You need to explain this." She held up the envelope. Patterson's envelope, the certified mail, already torn open with the kind of urgency that leaves ragged edges. "You've revoked everything. The trust, the will, the power of attorney, all of it. You cut me out completely." I stepped back and held the door open. She came in the way she always came in, like the house owed her its walls. She dropped the envelope on the side table without asking and turned to face me in the middle of the living room, her weight shifted forward the way it shifted when she was building toward something. "Why now?" she demanded. "After everything? After a year of taking care of you? After everything we've done? Why now?" I sat down in my chair by the window, the one that faced the maple trees. I did not rush to answer. "You already have the answer," I said. "It was in the envelope." "Don't do that." Her voice sharpened. "Don't be cryptic with me. I deserve a real explanation." "All right." I folded my hands in my lap. "I cooked for your household for 14 months. I cleaned. I picked up your children from school 17 times last semester. I counted, Sandra, because I had nothing else to do while I waited in the carpool line. I paid half the utility bills. I paid for the children's winter coats last year because you mentioned it in passing and I could see you were stretched thin." I paused. "I did all of that, and I was still told to wait in the kitchen while everyone else ate." "That was one moment," she said. "One bad moment at the end of a very stressful week?" "It was not one moment," I said still evenly. "It was the moment I finally understood what all the other moments had been adding up to." She opened her mouth and I kept going, because there were things that needed to be said, and I had waited long enough to say them. "You convinced me to move in with you by telling me you would take care of me. What you meant was that you would manage me. There is a difference, Sandra, and I understand now that you may not be able to see it, but I need you to hear it. Managing someone is not the same as loving them." Her arms tightened across her chest. "I was trying to keep things organized. Someone had to. You added yourself to my bank accounts without telling me the full scope of what you were doing. You signed me onto a power of attorney that included my medical decisions. You handed me the pen while I was thinking about something else and told me it was standard language." I held her gaze. "And then you spent 14 months making slow, quiet decisions about my money, my home, my time, and my place at the dinner table. None of that is care, Sandra. That is control." The word landed. I watched it land. She flinched. A small movement, barely visible, but it was there. The flinch of someone who has been named accurately. "I didn't." She stopped, started again. "I wasn't trying to." "I know," I said. "That's almost the hardest part. You weren't trying to hurt me. You just didn't stop to consider whether you were." The room was very quiet. Outside, a car passed slowly. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and then went silent. Sandra uncrossed her arms. For a moment, she looked less like the woman in the authoritative blazer and more like the girl she had been at 9 years old, standing in the kitchen doorway after breaking something, waiting to find out how bad it was going to be. "You're leaving everything to Cora," she said. Her voice had changed. Smaller now, and underneath the smaller voice, something that might have been hurt, or might have been the beginning of understanding. I could not be sure which. "Yes. She's 23. She's kind," I said. "She shows up. She asks questions. She never once, not in 23 years, made me feel like an inconvenience." I paused. "You had the same years, Sandra. You had more of them." She looked away from me toward the window, toward the maple trees that were almost bare now, just a few stubborn leaves holding on in the way stubborn things do. "I don't know what you want from me," she said. I don't want anything from you, I said. That's what I've been trying to tell you. I'm not punishing you. I'm not asking you to perform an apology or arrive with a dish of food and call it even. I am simply, finally, making decisions that reflect who I actually am and what I actually want. And what is that? To live in my own house, to eat at my own table, to have my name on my own accounts, to decide at the end of my own life who speaks for me. I looked at her steadily. Those are not extraordinary things, Sandra. Those are the most ordinary things in the world. I should never have let them become negotiable. She was quiet for a long time. The late afternoon light moved across the floor between us, the shadows stretching longer. I miss you, she said finally. I believe you. But I'm still done living under your conditions. I kept my voice gentle. There was no satisfaction in this for me. I want that to be clear. Not a single atom of pleasure in any of it. I'm not done with you, Sandra. You are my daughter and that is permanent, whether either of us chooses it or not. But I am done pretending that arrangement was care. I am done being grateful for access to my own life. She stood up. She looked at me with the expression of a person standing at a door they do not know how to open and are not yet ready to walk through. I don't know what else to do, she said. You don't have to do anything, I told her. Just stop expecting me to go back to the woman I was when I forgot myself. She left without slamming the door. The quiet close of it was in its own way more final than any slam could have been. I sat in the chair a long time after she was gone. Not triumphant, not bereft, just still, in the way of something that has finally been set down after being carried too long. Later, Cora called. She came, didn't she? Cora said. No question mark. She did. Are you okay? I thought about it genuinely before I answered. I'm better, clearer, a pause. Then quietly, did it help, saying it all out loud? It helped me remember, I said, that a boundary is not cruelty. It's just truth, drawn in permanent ink. Cora didn't say anything for a moment. When she did speak, her voice was soft and sure. Good, Grandma. That's good. We did not talk long. We did not need to. The letter came on a Tuesday, tucked between a cable bill and a grocery circular, in a cream-colored envelope with wide, looping handwriting I did not recognize at first. I almost threw it away with the circulars. The return address stopped me. Agnes Thornton, Bozeman, Montana. I stood in the hallway holding the envelope and reached back through 40 years of memory until the name found its shape. Agnes. Agnes with the menthol cigarettes and the long brown braid hanging down her back like a rope. Agnes with the twin boys who were always muddy, always loud, always somehow in my yard, even when I was certain they had started the morning in hers. Agnes, who used to sit with me on her back steps in the evenings after the children had finally exhausted themselves, drinking coffee we were both too old to be drinking that late, talking about everything and nothing in the way that only very old friends can. She had moved to Idaho, no, Montana, when her husband was transferred. We had promised to write. We had not written. I opened the envelope at the kitchen table with a knife, the way my mother taught me to open letters that mattered. The paper was heavy, the kind people buy when they intend to say something permanent. The ink was blue and slightly uneven, the handwriting of a woman whose hands had slowed but not stopped. Dot, it began. She was the only person in the world who had ever called me that. I saw your name in the church bulletin from Grace Fellowship. They circulated it online somehow. The world is strange now. They mentioned you'd spoken at a memorial fundraiser for your daughter Lily last spring. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I'm so sorry about Lily. I'm sorry it took me this long to say so. She used to draw her inventions on my driveway in chalk, do you remember? She told me once she was going to invent a machine that turned rainy days into something useful. I believed her completely. She wrote about her boys. One was a high school history teacher in Missoula. The other worked in forestry outside Billings. She had 5 grandchildren and a bad hip she refused to let slow her down, and a dog named Walter. I named him after your Earl, I hope you don't mind. He had the same dignified expression, and she had moved into a smaller house last year and found, in the unpacking, a photograph of the 2 of us standing in her backyard, young and laughing at something just outside the frame. I don't remember what was so funny, she wrote, but I remember that we laughed like that all the time back then. Like we had an inexhaustible supply of it. Then, near the end, the paragraph that made me set the letter down and press both hands flat on the table. I still remember the woman who danced barefoot in the rain at your 40th birthday party. The one who said, "If the world's already wet, you may as well move with it." Dot, I hope you've kept dancing. And if life has made that difficult, it does for all of us. It has for me, too. I just want you to know, it's never too late to start again. I sat with the letter for a long time. That woman Agnes remembered, the one dancing barefoot in the rain, laughing at the sky, believing that the world being wet was a reason to move rather than a reason to stop. She was not a fantasy. She was not someone I had invented or misremembered. She was real. She had lived in this body, with these hands, in this life. I had buried her so gradually I had not noticed the burial. But she was not gone. I went to the cabinet where I kept the things that did not have another place. Spare batteries, old birthday cards, the small ceramic bowl Cora made in a pottery class at 14 and gave to me for Christmas. At the back, beneath a winter scarf I had forgotten I owned, I found the CD Cora had made for me years ago. Grandma's Jazz, written on the front in silver marker, the letters slightly uneven with the care of someone who wanted to get it right. I did not know if it would still play. I found the old stereo on the shelf in the living room, the one Sandra had suggested I donate twice and I had declined twice, dusted it off and put the disc in. It crackled, then it caught. Nina Simone's voice filled the room, low and warm and unhurried, the way honey moves when you tilt the jar. I stood by the kitchen window in my socks, arms loose at my sides, and I listened. Then, because no one was watching and no one needed anything from me, and the floor was mine to creak if I wanted it to creak, I let myself sway. My knees had opinions. The floorboards announced every movement. None of that mattered. I moved anyway. It was not dancing, not exactly, but it was close enough to remind me of what dancing had felt like. And that, it turned out, was enough. I wrote Agnes back that same afternoon. I told her about Lily and about Cora and about the roast I had carried out the front door, like an offering to my former self. I told her about the binder in the kitchen drawer and the new email address and the bus ride to the bank on a Tuesday morning when I had remembered, finally, that I was still a person with a name on accounts and a deed and a legal right to every decision made in the course of my own life. I did not mention Sandra. I did not need to. I ended with a line Agnes had said to me once, 35 years ago, when I had spilled coffee on a new dress at her kitchen table and nearly cried over it. "You're allowed to be messy. Just don't pretend it's someone else's mess." I walked to the mailbox in the late afternoon wind. When I came back inside, the lemon tree print above the kitchen sink fluttered slightly in the draft from the door. "I remember you," I said to the woman Agnes remembered. And I meant it. I signed the lease on a Friday morning. 2 rooms and a kitchen on the second floor of a quiet building 3 blocks from the park. Nothing grand. The carpets were older than I would have chosen, and the kitchen was narrow enough that turning around required a small commitment. But the windows faced east. Every morning the light came in slow and golden and entirely without apology. That mattered more than granite countertops ever could. The landlord's name was Howard Greer, 60, unhurried, the kind of man who explains where the breaker panel is without being asked and doesn't hover to make sure you've understood. When I asked if I could repaint the kitchen cabinets, he considered it for about 2 seconds. "As long as you don't pick black," he said. "I trust your judgment." I chose sage green. Cora helped me move in on a Saturday. We made a day of it, unpacking slowly, drinking iced tea from mismatched mugs, laughing when we found things I didn't remember owning and couldn't explain. She hung the lemon tree print above the kitchen sink without being asked. She found the spot for it by standing in the middle of the room, head tilted, the way Lily used to stand when she was solving something. "It looks like you," she said, stepping back to check the level. "A faded print of a lemon tree," I said. "Rooted," she said, "but still growing." Before she left, she set a small trailing plant on the windowsill, a pothos, deep green, the vines already reaching. "Every woman needs a plant," she said. "It's proof you can still nurture something." After she left, I sat on the couch and listened to the new quiet. It was different from the quiet in Sandra's house, which had always felt like the silence of a room holding its breath, waiting for someone to need something, waiting for the performance to resume. This quiet was different. It did not press. It did not wait. It simply was, the way a room is when it belongs to you and only to you, and there is no version of you that is required here except the real one. I made a simple dinner. Sautéed spinach, a boiled egg, toast with butter. I ate it at my own table, watching the shadows climb the opposite wall. No one asked why there weren't more sides. No one mentioned the softness of the yolk. The next morning I met my neighbor. Her name was Ruth Caldwell, 84 years old, a cane covered in floral stickers, and the direct gaze of a woman who had long since stopped caring what you thought of her directness. She was waiting in the hallway when I opened my door, inspecting me with the frank assessment of someone checking the quality of a new shipment. "You're the new one," she said. "I suppose I am." She pointed at the door across the hall. "Don't put trash out before 5. They find us." Then she leaned slightly closer. "The woman in 2B feeds the squirrels from her window. Don't tell management. I like her too much to see her evicted. I won't say a word." She studied me for another moment. "You divorced?" "Widowed." She tilted her head. "Then what brings you here?" I did not hesitate. I remembered I'm allowed to live on my own terms. Ruth looked at me for a long beat. Then the corner of her mouth moved upward in the particular smile of a woman who has heard a great many things in a great many hallways and knows which ones are worth keeping. "Well," she said, "it's about time." The morning I turned 79, I found a note taped to my door. Small paper, the kind torn from a spiral notebook, folded once. The handwriting was Cora's. I would know it anywhere. The same slightly left-leaning letters she had been writing since 3rd grade. "Happy birthday, Dorothy. You remind me who I want to become." No signature. She didn't need one. I stood in the doorway in my bathrobe and read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and carried it inside and set it on the table beside Grace's, beside Lily's, letters in the wooden box. I made myself pancakes that morning. Just 2, with butter and a thin drizzle of maple syrup and half a banana sliced alongside. I ate them slowly, the morning sun warm on the floor by my feet, the pothos on the windowsill catching the light and throwing small green shadows across the wall. After breakfast, I opened the kitchen drawer and took out the binder. I had not opened it since the day I brought it home from Patterson's office. But that morning, my 79th birthday, in my own kitchen in my own apartment, with my own name on the lease and my own sunlight on my own floor, I opened it and added one last letter. Short, 1 page, folded once. "Cora, what I have is yours. Not because of blood alone, but because of kindness. You never once tried to manage me. You just showed up and met me where I was standing. You brought pastries and asked questions and made copies of keys and set a plant on my windowsill and told me I was rooted but still growing. That is love. That is the whole of it. Don't let anyone teach you it's supposed to be more complicated than that. Don't let anyone convince you that love requires you to make yourself smaller. It doesn't. Real love makes room. What I've built is yours. Take care of it. Take care of yourself first. All my love, always, Dorothy." I placed the letter behind the will, closed the binder, and put it back in the drawer. Then I went and sat on the small balcony with my second cup of tea and watched the morning move through the neighborhood the way mornings do. The mail truck making its rounds, a woman walking a dog that was far too large for the leash she'd chosen, 2 boys on bicycles racing each other down the hill with the particular joy of people who have not yet learned to be afraid of speed. The world, entirely unbothered by my peace, kept going. And that was exactly right. Cora came that Friday. No warning, no text. Just a soft knock and her face behind the frosted glass panel of the door, slightly flushed from the stairs, hair pulled back unevenly the way it always was when she had been in a hurry to get somewhere she wanted to be. She held up a brown paper bag. "I brought mushrooms, and those little pearl onions you like." "I was just thinking about soup," I said. She grinned. Then I timed it perfectly. We cooked together in the narrow kitchen, moving around each other with the ease of people who have been in each other's orbits long enough to know the patterns. I cleaned the mushrooms with a soft cloth. No soaking, no shortcuts. Cora watched and then did the same without being told. She peeled onions with practiced hands, blinking against the sting. "Mom scrubs them under the faucet," she said. "Your mother never had patience for mushrooms." She smiled and kept peeling. The soup came together slowly, the way good things do. The smell of it filled the apartment, earthy and warm and deeply, specifically itself. Cora found the bowls without asking. She set the table without fuss. When we sat down, neither of us reached for a phone. She tasted the first spoonful and closed her eyes. "God, Grandma, this is perfect." "It's just soup." "No." She opened her eyes and looked at me across the table. It's yours. That's the difference. We ate slowly. She dipped her bread into the broth and let it soak before each bite, the way I had always done and had apparently taught her without knowing I was teaching. When the bowls were nearly empty, she looked up. Do you think I'll end up like her? She asked. No bitterness in it. Just the question, bare and honest, from a young woman looking at the women around her and trying to understand what she was made of. No, I said. You already asked the question she never could. She was quiet for a moment. She's been sending messages, wants to talk. Do you want to? She thought about it, genuinely, the way she thought about everything, turning it over carefully before she answered. Then she shook her head. Not yet. I don't trust what she wants from it. You don't owe her more than you have to give, I said. She looked at me with something in her expression that was not quite relief, but was close to it. The look of someone who needed something said aloud rather than given permission. Because she didn't need my permission. She just needed to hear that the thing she already knew was actually true. After dinner, we washed up together. She dried, I rinsed. The water was warm, and the kitchen was small, and the radio on the counter played something low and unhurried that neither of us felt the need to identify. I like it here, Cora said, drawing a bowl in slow circles. You've said that before. I mean it more each time. She set the bowl on the shelf. It feels honest. This place. You. I handed her the last bowl. That's the second time you've used that word tonight. I know. She hung the dish towel over the oven handle and leaned against the counter, looking around the kitchen. The sage green cabinets, the lemon tree print, the pothos reaching toward the window in the particular way of things that know which direction the light comes from. I think I've been craving it. Later, we moved to the living room. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch the way she had sat on floors since she was small, and I sat beside her because the floor was mine to sit on if I wanted, and my knees had opinions, but they were not in charge. I used to think you were just quiet, she said after a while. When I was little, I thought you were just the kind of person who didn't say much. And now? Now I think you were just careful, like you were always watching, always measuring. She paused, waiting to see if it was safe. I thought about that, about the decades of measuring, the careful calibrations of when to speak and when to absorb and when to simply keep moving. I was, I said, for a very long time. And now? Now, I said, I'm learning to answer before I'm asked. She leaned her head back against the cushions and smiled at the ceiling. I want to be like that, she said. You already are. You just haven't noticed yet. When she left, she hugged me at the door, long, unhurried, the hug of someone who is not in a rush to be anywhere else. Same time next week? She said against my shoulder. Bring good bread, I said. I'll make something worth dunking it in. After she was gone, I cleaned the counter, wiped the stove, folded the dish towel over the sink. The apartment smelled like garlic and thyme and the specific warmth of an evening that asked nothing of you and gave you everything anyway. I poured a small glass of wine, sat by the window. Outside, the street lamp made a soft pool of amber on the wet pavement. The air looked like velvet, thick, quiet, the deep blue of a night that has settled in and means to stay. I did not think about Sandra. I thought about Cora, about soup and salt and the way she had looked at me across the table and said, it's yours, that's the difference, as if she had known all along what I was only now beginning to understand. Some things properly tended do not need saving. They just need space. They just need time. They just need someone who knows the difference between managing them and letting them be what they already are. There is a moment just before dawn when the world holds its breath. The sky is not light yet, and not dark either. The shadows soften. Even the wind pauses. That is when I like to walk now. Just a short loop, down to the corner, past the bakery that opens too early, past the park where the benches are still damp from the night, past the hardware store where a hand-painted sign in the window says open since 1987 with the particular pride of something that has simply decided to keep going. Some mornings I see Ruth in the hallway when I come back in, already up, already dressed, her sticker-covered cane tapping a slow rhythm on the tile. She waves. I wave back. Two women in the early morning, asking nothing of each other except acknowledgement. That is enough. That is, it turns out, exactly enough. I am 79 years old. I have buried a husband and a daughter. I have raised children and fed tables full of people who sometimes forgot I was the one who had made everything possible. I have signed my name away and taken it back. I have eaten a perfect roast alone at midnight and found it to be the finest meal of my life. I have a binder in a kitchen drawer and a plant on a windowsill, and a granddaughter who shows up on Fridays with mushrooms and pearl onions and asks questions that the rest of the world is afraid to ask. I have mornings. I have music. I have the particular smell of soup simmering on a stove that belongs entirely to me. I have enough. And if you have been reading this, if any part of this story has found you, I want you to hear what no one may have said to you in a very long time. You are not too old to reclaim what is yours. You are not too quiet, too tired, too far gone. You are not a burden to be managed or a chapter to be finished. You are a person with a name on things, with a history that belongs to you, with the absolute and unconditional right to sit at your own table and eat your own food and decide every single morning what kind of day you are going to have. You do not need anyone's blessing to come back to yourself. You just need to begin. So begin, right now.